Hello, I am Mischievous Marchinacchio, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy number 15, and, of course, all of the Amazing Spider-Man annuals. However, those annuals, I say, do not count.
And I'm Dapper Dan Gavosnan, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which I say count. A dubious claim, I'll admit. But for me, Amazing Fantasy 15 remains a fantasy.
Well, dubious or not, Dan, welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe. Thanks for joining us for this review episode of the Amazing Spider Talk.
If you want to swing along with us on our journey through Spidey's past, present, and future, subscribe to Amazing Spider Talk on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review to help spread the word about our show.
This podcast exists because of the support of our Patreon members, so if you want to receive early episodes, exclusive artwork, and of course keep this podcast going, go to amazingspidertalk.com and consider joining our Patreon.
Today on the show, Mark and I are going to be discussing Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, number 48. This issue was written by Zeb Wells. The cover features artwork by John Romita Jr., Scott Hanna, and Morry Hollowell. And interior artwork is by Todd Nauck, colors by Sonia Oback, and of course letters by VC's Joe Caramanga. This issue was first released on April 24th, 2024. And I think there's no better place to start than with the Winkler device itself. Hey!
I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore.
That joke has been buried officially.
Okay,
so
very
there
good.
we go. I wanted to talk about this to start things off because, one of the things that we've kind of beat up on the Zeb Wells run about is the inconsistency of the rules. Like, just when you think you understand how one thing works, like the sins of Norman Osborn, it doesn't really seem to be held consistently across the board. And I don't know if that's true of the Winkler device, but it seems kind of like we're getting a redefinition of what the device does in a way that I am a little bit mixed on. And I don't know, maybe you know more about this than I do, although I think we're both Winkler device experts to some degree, if only by the volume of times we've said the word Winkler device.
Sure.
But my understanding was never that it explicitly turns you into a goblin or makes you think that you're a goblin, more than it was just a generic mind control device that could be used to control whoever is under the, switch of someone else. I guess we've only really ever seen it be used to convince people that they're goblins.
Right.
But was that established somewhere and I didn't know it? Because it seems like this issue just kind of takes it for granted that the Winkler device is a goblin machine.
No, it definitely feels like we are just there is some narrative somewhere that is not known to us and we're just skipping through it and making, like you said, rules up kind of as we go. I mean, we can, for me personally, part of what not confused me, because I wasn't necessarily confused. It was like, oh, okay, we're just changing the rules and this is what we're doing now. But at the same time, I was like, why then is Betty so insistent on having the getting the Winkler device? It's going to clear Ned's name. How? It's not that he's been turned into a goblin. He's been brainwashed into thinking he's the Hobgoblin. It doesn't add up. We're establishing some major holes in logic here, and yeah, I was able to follow it easily enough because it's all just MacGuffin magic mumbo jumbo anyway. But at the same time, this just felt like some really flawed storytelling here in terms of just kind of telling us to close our eyes and just go with it.
I think it still works. If this is a retcon, if you will, about the status of the Winkler device, it's consistent. It's just not ever it's more specific of a device than I ever thought it was, which maybe I should be asking more questions about that MacGuffin as it pertains to Hobgoblin Lives and, all of the previous uses of the Winkler device. But for me, the bigger thing is I think there's a missed opportunity by making this explicitly an evil device here, which is to say, like, it kind of removes Peter from like having to make a tough choice, a different tough choice than what he had to make at the end of Beyond, right? At the end of Beyond, Ben is saying, like, Peter, just put this helmet on and, you can help me restore my memories. And Peter says, like, no, I know that thing is destructive. Even if it were to help you, I can't take that risk. And, I think we could complain about that not being as fleshed out as it could have been to make that final moment for Ben and Peter really sing in the way that, like, it really easily could have. But here, by making it such an objectively evil device, there's no temptation for Peter to say, it's either Ben or Ned, right? Like, who can I save? Which I think would be a really great Spider-Man moment where it's like, I have to make a moral choice that is murky. But here, the device being evil kind of takes away that. It's like, it's just a bad thing Peter has to stop, which maybe makes it narratively more clear. It's just like, okay, like these are the things that need to happen. But it does miss out on something a little more interesting, if not like an additional wrinkle onto the Beyond story. Do you get what I'm saying?
No, I do. I mean, I guess, not to sound, nihilistic the way this comic sometimes was, but like, that kind of depth of storytelling has been kind of missing for a while now here. So, I mean, whereas, yes, it's a missed opportunity, but I think that's kind of status quo for where this book is at right now. Again, I also just kind of challenge, like, it's a goblin device, but like, it's got Peter's memories are in it. This feels very, pain, like we're playing improv jazz right now in terms of like trying to get this story from one place to another. And like it's like I said, I'm not confused, but at the same time, I'm just like, all right, like this doesn't really make sense, but we'll keep going here, and it's hard to even focus about like what they could have done, because it's like I'm still just like, oh, okay, so we're doing this now, and we're doing this now, and we're doing this now. Okay, got it. Like it just seems a little haphazard right now.
We're back. I feel like we're like solid. We'll talk about this more later too when we get to this beat. But like, I feel like we're also solidly back in mystery box territory to set up issue 50. And like,
Right.
I know that's only 2 issues away, and fine. Like, we're gonna deliver on it fairly quickly, I assume. But it again puts us, the reader, behind the story, and there's some fun stuff teased here. But it does make me go, like, can I just get a clean Spidey story where I understand how all the pieces work? And I also think, like, the choice here to make it an evil device and have it explicitly spelled out that way in front of Ben and Janine makes Ben and Janine into the 2 dumbest people in this comic. Like, they have a villain saying, like, ha ha ha, I have a master plan, and it's not what you think it is. And they're like, sign me up still. And maybe they're desperate. And some of their dumbness is charming in a weird way. But it just means that their decisions are stupid, and I really don't put a lot of weight into it. And maybe I'm just getting numb to the dumbness of Chasm, and how those characters have behaved, enough that I think this is one of the better chapters with them. But it's still dumb.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can say at the ending this time, at least, like, he doesn't seem completely irredeemable per se, but like this character still, I don't know what the core of this character is, and maybe that's the point, because he doesn't know who he is. But at the same time, it's like there still needs to be a character there, and I don't think people creating these comics have picked that character for Chasm yet, and we've now seen him in 3 stories. So, like, pick soon, please. It's I guess. I mean, speaking of confusing characters, let's talk a little bit about Queen Goblin here because I think she's a bit of a mess in this story too. You know, like, first she's kind of like Craven's ride or die or Crayju, whatever, Sky Point to Alan, not Sky Point, but Alan represent. But he's not in the sky, I swear. But
Alan is alive. He is
he's
alive.
very much alive. But also just like now she's turning her attention on getting revenge on Ben. What's your take on what is going on with Ashley Kafka's Queen Goblin here, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, again, like you, I can understand it, and I can like no prize it. It doesn't confuse me, but it is a little all over the place. Like starting off on the positive ish, at least the book addresses the whole like she's still a goblin thing. Like she explicitly finally spells it out here. Like I thought getting rid of the sins of Norman would like cure me of this, and yet it hasn't. So now I'm out for revenge, and it's like, okay, cool. I would feel that way too because, you establish the rules being one thing and then those don't work. I guess I would be upset too. Personally, I'm upset that the writers don't seem to be consistent, but I guess in the fiction of this world, she should lash out at whoever she wants to. But I don't know that it makes sense for her to lash out at Ben more than it makes sense for her to lash out at like Maxine Danger, who I understand is still out there. And like the Beyond thing, like, look, I'm not begging for Beyond to be weaved back into this book because I found the inclusion of Beyond baffling kind of in the first place. But like
beyond the pale.
Yeah, like at least lash out at the people that really did this to you. And like there's enough of a reason there. Like she says like she tried to warn Ben about Beyond, and when he didn't protect her, they were allowed to do this to her. And I guess, but I think there's a much cleaner way of doing it. Like, Quick Rewrite says, like, hey, Ben, like, you signed up with Beyond to be with Janine, and you got everything you want, and were willing to look the other way at all the other stuff they were doing in order to have your happy ending. And you didn't care about all the people that were hurt along the way, and now I'm back to hurt you. And it's like, okay, like I would understand that motivation straight away. Here, I just think like they landed on something that just is not. It just makes you ask, like, Ben is not the architect of all of your problems,
right?
Like there's a better target for this.
Yeah, she's like, I'm paying you back for what? For for not listening. I don't. Like, cause if I am to surmise what's going on here is, like I said a few minutes ago, it feels like, we're at a place with Ben now where, he's not completely insufferable, maybe, I don't know. So like we're maybe trying to turn him more anti-hero again. It's we're gonna move forward. Are you bad? Are you good? It doesn't matter. That's kind of, and I know, I don't know if we're gonna. Point being is like I feel like we're trying to set something up here with how these certain characters are acting, and there's an outcome in mind, although the outcome is not necessarily being manifest in this issue. It's probably going to manifest down the line, but because of that, we're getting like half baked storytelling here, and it's like, okay, so we're going to use Ashley Kafka to juxtapose Ben's situation and kind of show, okay, well, Ben isn't all the way there, like Kafka. Not that she was sympathetic in the Craven story, but I guess like, she was trying to get rid of the sins, that were put into her, and well, that didn't work. So now she's just bad, I guess, or whatever. I'm not a fan of this. Is the bottom line, Dan, because I feel like we're jumping bits in stories, and like I keep saying over and over again, and just telling the reader to just close their eyes and go with it. and we're not doing the real work that needs to be done with any of these characters right now. It's a mess. This book is a mess right now. This
Yeah.
specific book.
Yeah. Oh, I will get to the thing that I actually liked about this book, because I think I
Sure.
texted you like after reading it, like, hey, there was some stuff I dug in this book, and
Yeah.
specifically around the stuff with Betty. I really, I I think the conversation she has with Janine and the result it has is a bit of a cheat, but I think it's actually like a clever use of Betty and her accumulated history in this title being put to a fairly decent use, which is to say, she tells Janine, like, hey, like, you're going to spend so much time trying to fix this guy, it's going to destroy you too, you know?
Yeah.
And for me, I think it's almost a better moment for Betty than it is for Janine, because it's
For
like,
sure.
oh, cool. Like, Betty is talking about her relationship with Ned Leeds and all the pain that that has caused her. Not a favorite storyline of mine. Ned Leeds is like Mr. Forgettable. I actually like, if you're going to bring in a supporting cast member and have them get involved in super heroics in this way, like, I thought this was a decent leverage of Betty's history to then contrast with Janine to facilitate whatever change is going to ultimately happen. Why Janine saying this to Ben would cause him to change his mind about, like, letting go of the past and moving to the future, I don't really know. And maybe that's because their relationship is still just a big kind of question
Right.
mark for me. But I think, like, there is something really solid there in that character beat for Betty.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I feel like, once a decade we get like a really good Betty Brant story or a good Betty Brant moment. Like someone will use her well, whether it's Mark Waid or Roger Stern or in this case Zeb Wells, and like, I know I was joking in the recap, like, oh, so that's what worked, right before she sucker punches her, but at the same time, like, there was some potency to what she said, and similar to what you're saying, putting aside, like, okay, so what kind of hold does Janine have on Ben that, just saying, no, we're going to look forward now, gets him to kind of snap out of whatever malaise he's in. But at the same time, like, I do appreciate the status quo here going forward. It's like, hey, look, like let's stop chasing the dragon of the past here and just, look forward and be who we are, and, who you are without Peter's memories is enough for me. And it was like, oh, okay. Like it's not, this is not a bad place for these characters at this point. I mean, you can argue, why have they been led down this path in the first place? Because they have been. I mean, these are the choices that were made with the Ben Reilly character, and I know there are going to be people out there that's never going to be good enough. But, like, okay, putting that aside, this is where they are, and this is a logical next step to keep their story moving in some kind of forward way. Because if we were just going to keep getting every 4 to 6 months, here's Chasm again trying to get his memories back, like, it was already played out for this story. So, like, yeah, let's get some new stuff going. Let's get a new arc or write him out of the book, whatever you're gonna do. But like they're just move this other status quo off the board into something new.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like, I don't know that I was ever excited about Chasm, but the idea that is presented here at the end is what you and I were talking about 50 issues ago, which is
Right.
like, oh, a cool thing for Ben is to say, who is Ben without Peter's memories? And like, so like, is he someone that has been shaped by tragedy and rejection and always feeling like the other? And what does that do to someone without the Uncle Ben and those core memories, which, like, Beyond set up, like that opening issue with the hole in Uncle Ben's face? Like, I think we were talking about it all the way back in issue, 75 of Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, that, like, oh, that's a neat idea. Well, cool. I don't know that Zeb's going to have any more room to play with that idea, because I know Steve Fox is going to get a chance at writing a Chasm book, and maybe that's where it goes. But like that's a cool idea at its heart of it. I could have done without Dark Web and all of the nonsense in between. But like the idea of Ben without being in Peter's shadow is kind of cool. And before we go to break, one last thing I wanted to say in regards to good stories with Betty Brant. I immediately flash back to the last great Betty Brant story. I guess it's the last great Betty Brant story, issue 665, the Peter and Betty movie date story, which is funny because in this issue, you get Peter kind of like making fun of Betty when like Jason Voorhees or whatever shows up, and he's like, Betty, you need to watch more movies. And it's like, wait a minute, literally the last great Betty story was about how all you guys do together is watch movies. Anyway, that's been my nitpick for the episode, but
too soon, Dan. Too soon.
Too soon. Brand new day. Too soon. All right. Was that Brand New Day? No, that was what, Big Time?
That was the prelude to Spider Island.
That is right. Yeah.
I also think that was Ryan Stegman's first ASM work.
Correct.
So,
yeah.
There we go. All right.
Also a controversial issue because it's the one where like Aunt May suggested she blamed Peter for Uncle Ben's death or something like that.
Yeah, I remember. I remember
people didn't love that.
The kids getting mad on the old tweet machine on that. So
that doesn't happen anymore.
It's only today's comics that are outrageous, Dan.
All right, Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about where people can get more Spider-Man in their lives?
More outrage. Hundreds of listeners like you can hang out in our community of Spider-Man fans on Slack. The amazing Spider Slack community is absolutely free to join, and you can jump into active conversations with awesome people about collecting, conventions, movies, new comics, old comics, and more. Dan, it's been a while since we've checked in, and frankly, it's been a while since I've checked in on the Slack. You could say I've been slacking. I've had people email me to be like, since you're not on the Slack anymore, I'm like, whoa, everyone slow down. But what's been going on?
Yeah, well, we would love to have you back in there, Mark. Every time I post something on Twitter and then immediately regret that like any kind of like lukewarm take or whatever will get you called a shill, I'm reminded, you know what? The Slack exists. Why do I keep putting myself out here like this? Because in the Slack, we can disagree, but we all love each other because it's a really great place. And I'm very proud of it. I'm making a move back to the East Coast this summer. Maybe by the time this episode comes out, I'll be like weeks away from doing so. And Mark, I'm really excited because being back on the East Coast means probably you and I can get going to some conventions. I know like Terrificon is coming up and Baltimore Comic-Con is coming up, and there's some awesome guests. And, in our conventions channel, all of our Slackers have already started planning who's going to what and where they're going to meet up. So I suspect like if you're interested in meeting Mark or me or bumping into us at conventions, come onto the Slack. It's a great way to figure out like what's going on with us, or at least wherever I can update people on whatever's going on with Mark. So the Slack, a great place to be. We haven't plugged it in a while, so if you just joined us over the past few episodes, come check us out on the Slack. There's a link in the description of this episode that'll let you sign up in less than a minute, and then say hello, and everybody should be happy to welcome you in. All right, let's get back to Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, number 48. And back to the Winkler device. Hey! I resurrected this one. Look, someone has apparently been using the Winkler device on Peter. No idea when this started happening. I'm guessing after Gang War. Any guesses as to who that might be? I mean, we've seen the solicits for Amazing Spider-Man 50 to 54, and so spoilers for that. But we know that upcoming, we're getting the Spider Goblin, which prompted me to ask, didn't we already do this?
Right.
But apparently not. Now Peter seems... the logical conclusion is the Winkler device has gotten into Peter's mind and is going to make him into a goblin. To me, there's only one reasonable person behind this. and that's Norman Osborn, who has
Right.
for a long time, in whatever stories you want to read, there's that oh, I'm forgetting the name of it, but there's the one where he like dresses Peter up in a goblin costume and has him parading as the goblin, flying all around. Isn't it a Ron Friends story? I'm like slipping on that one. Um,
You talking about Revenge of the Goblin?
yes, Revenge of the Goblin.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Him and Stern. Yes, correct. Sorry.
Right. So like if you wanted to follow up on that, I could see maybe like this is the slow return of Norman, is that he has been at Oscorp poisoning Peter's mind. Is that where your brain goes to for something like this?
I mean, yeah, I mean, but that was also frankly why I was like asking about did I miss something? Because I was like, was there something even during the Craven arc with Queen Goblin that? But no, it was just the sins, right? So like
Yeah.
it would you know we've obviously have been suspecting for quite some time that you know Norman is going to break bad again eventually. I mean, it really is a matter of time. I mean, like, it does seem a little cliched that after playing the role of good guy for so long that like the breaking point is going to immediately be I'm going to turn you into a goblin, but maybe we'll get a surprise here. I mean, like even with the solicits being what they are, I mean, like I'm kind of like, what's this actually going to look like? Because spider solicits are not to be trusted in my mind. I mean, they might even have errors in them for all we know.
How dare you suggest
I
such a
know, I
thing?
know, I know. But yeah, I mean, like I certainly this would like explain like the whole thing with Michelle and the date that wasn't a few issues ago. Like I feel like we've had a few little bits of these drops. I can't recall any others besides Michelle, but I feel like there's been more than just Michelle where it's just like, oh wait, no, actually he's not been doing this. You know what I mean? So um, maybe it started during Gang War. Maybe it predated Gang War. Who knows? Maybe Osborn's been doing this the whole time. We're gonna find out, or somebody else. But um, let's see what happens. I guess I don't know.
Yeah. And I think, like, in terms of this book itself, like, if I had to guess the breakdown of, like, the final issues of Zeb Wells' run, which I think has kind of been not announced, but, like, there have been things saying, like, in the letters page of this book, it says, like, hey, Zeb Wells is going to come back and tell one final story with JRJR on Tombstone. And to me, is that how it started the run? That seems to be where the run is going to end. So I imagine what we're getting is we've got this JRJR vampire story coming up in the next issue, which I'm excited about. Give me a one-shot Spider-Man story. Like, cool. As far as I'm concerned, this book needs more of those. So I hope it's fun. But it seems like we're gonna get like, the resolution to this living brain and goblin story, with the 50th issue, and then probably get another arc, big arc with Tombstone and JRJR to end the Wells run and maybe set all these things right. So, I think the end of like this particular run seems to be clear and in sight by like issue 60 or so.
Hmm.
What did you think of Peter's involvement in this particular story? I mean, there's like a little bit of an arc for him in this like whole like I'm going to teach you about like the value of revenge or the lack of value in revenge. For me, it was just enough. This was more focused on
Yeah,
Betty and that story.
yeah, because I mean, I would say the different. I know we often will criticize when Peter feels kind of ancillary in his own comics, but I would push back on that here and the fact that I feel like he's not passive in this comic. I mean, he's
Yeah.
very central to the action, and he's there defending Betty multiple times. He defeats the villain in terms of Queen Goblin. I mean, granted, before she gets to like say spoil what we were just talking about with the
Yeah.
Winkler device. Yeah, I feel we need stories like this in Spider-Man where like the supporting cast shines. I mean, they're still the best supporting cast in comics, even if they're not always used in that way anymore. I will hold fast and true to that. As long as Peter is still driving the action, which I think he unquestionably is here. So I didn't have an issue with him kind of taking a semi back seat just in terms of like the narrative itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I also think like this book has enough to kind of juggle, like we got a nice Peter Parker moment in the previous issue. This one is the more action heavy, but it's also weaving together not just like the chasm stuff and the Queen Goblin stuff, but also like the history of Betty, through even the whole original Hobgoblin thing, not to mention the Hobgoblin stuff from this run, which I really enjoyed. So, like, I think it's got enough on its plate that it found room for Peter to still kind of like assert his moral standards, so to speak, was fine for me. Do you have any
Yeah.
thoughts on the art in this? I know we talked a lot about Todd Nauck and Oback in the last issue.
It was fine. Again, I think I liked the last issue a bit more. I felt like some of the character stuff. I really liked the like the pacing and the visuals of the date last issue, and I don't feel like we got anything like that here. But like everything else was pretty. It was. What was the phrase I used last time? Professional artwork. That is
Yeah.
that is what it is. But like, there was nothing that like, I mean, was there anything that really called out to you here? Because I can't put my finger on anything here that I was like, oh wow, that was really interesting or really cool to look at. I mean, it was just kind of like, okay, it's fine.
I mean, it's impossible to know what's in the script and what's in the art, but like I
Yeah.
always, when I'm looking at art, trying to think like what elevates what I imagine the script to be, and so like I think like I like all the mutilate stuff. I think his rendering of like the Jason Voorhees character is like really fun and gritty, and I feel like it's something I've not seen from Knock. But the bit that like sold me a little bit more on this comic, like I just criticized how dumb Chasm and Janine are written, but there's a moment where like the like Winkler device chair is available and Chasm like hops into it in like a
Yeah.
silly cartoon way, and that in some ways mitigated the dumbness of the characters because they were drawn kind of like a cartoon, and I was like,
Right.
that's kind of charmingly stupid.
Yes.
And so like I was like, at least Knock got the assignment. Like Ben is a big dummy, and he's gonna draw him that way. And for me, that was like a moment that elevated or maybe like brought down the story enough that it matched like what was
Right.
happening. So like
For
I
sure.
wanted to highlight that. Although I think like his Ben, like his tortured Ben just looks like a teen heartthrob, and I just can't move past it. He looks like a child. And like for like a character is like we're told as tortured as Chasm, it's just kind of silly to me, like the rendering of that character. So I'm still very middle of the road on my opinion on Knock, even if he is more like I find him as a person charming and his work charming too. I don't know that this was the right story for him, but I am pleased by his growth as a professional comic artist. But it's not gonna like it's not blowing me away,
That's
like
it. Yeah.
yeah.
All
So
right. Well, what's your grade on everything then, Dan?
I think this one's a C minus. It's like a fairly average Spider-Man comic that does some decent things with the lore and the characters, but nothing I'm gonna really remember all that fondly.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. C minus for me as well.
All right, Mark. Well, why don't you take us home then?
Well, it's that time. Time for all good things to come to an end. So we want to say thank you to you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning in to this episode of The Amazing Spider Talk.
Yeah, this podcast exists because of your listener support on Patreon. For only $3.99 a month, you can help support our show's existence while getting early episodes, including these reviews the same week the comics release, exclusive artwork, and a ton of other bonuses. Thank you to everybody who already supports us and the work that we do, but we wanted to extend a special thanks to our newest contributor, Goodwin Forrester.
That sounds like a name out of a movie, Dan. I love it.
It does. It's a cool name, yeah.
Okay. Dan and I really want to increase all the awesome work we do in 2024, even though 2024 is almost halfway over now. So if you are already a patron or want to become one, please help us to meet our goals and make this a better podcast by considering supporting our show. Just go to AmazingSpiderTalk.com and click on that big old Patreon button to get started.
Mark, it's been a little bit since we've done a Substack. I think our lives just got very, very busy, and
we'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be back. I mean, there's a new issue of Ultimate Spider-Man, and we need to weigh in on that and potentially have the internet pick sides on who they agree with. I don't know. Anyway, if you want to read more about all of our thoughts on Spider-Man, especially Ultimate Spider-Man, where we're reviewing it in our Substack, you can go to amazingspider.substack.com, or if you have a Substack app, you can just search for Amazing Spider Talk, and it should come right up. I think even if you search for Amazing Spider-Man, we're probably the only Substack covering that. So, Mark, until we, like Chasm, are sponsored by Mountain Dew, what's our motto?
With great podcasts, there must also come the Amazing Spider Talk.
And for the record, Mountain Dew, if you're listening, we will happily change our motto for your sponsorship. What motto? What responsibility? Bring on the Mountain Dew.
I will do the do for Amazing Spider Talk.
Great.